You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode. Before we get started on this episode, here's a not so short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster or the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak with a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's courses on Udemy or Skillshare, and you can find out more about those at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello. You're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley. Today we are on episode 208. I hope all of you are doing well and you're staying safe. May is almost over. We have one more week left. So hope all of you are doing well and spring is treating you well and you're enjoying the outdoors. It was for us, I should say, it was a fairly long winter. We got a lot of snow. So we're really enjoying these no snow days. They'll be here soon enough this fall. But anyhow, today in episode 208, our topic is black mold infestations due to improper grading. So this is probably the most common thing that we talk about, and we talk about it often. And the reason is it is probably the most common defect that we see, whether it's a home inspection or a mold inspection. Grading and drainage is very important. And if you've listened to most of our podcast episodes or read any of my books or followed me on social media, you know that I will cover grading and drainage until I'm blue in the face. It is so important. I cannot stress enough how important grading and drainage is. You know, a lot of times people think it's something that's not that big of a deal. As humans, I do believe we're creatures of habit, and we do the same things over and over and over again, and we don't think there's anything wrong with it until something major happens. And then when that happens, we say, oh crap, maybe I should have paid attention to that flat grading outside now that I have a foundation concern or a mold concern. So it's something that I believe we think about it, but I think on the other hand, we don't think it's that big of a deal. And grading and drainage is huge. So just for fun, I tried to use my Chat GPT, our favorite new toy that most of us are playing around with lately. This AI stuff. I asked the definition of grading and drainage, and I was actually quite surprised, So I'm just going to read to you what Chat GPT said. It says, grading and drainage can be defined as the reshaping of your property or land between different points in the landscaping to properly drain the site and steer water away from structures and prevent flooding. So that's a pretty good definition. I'd love to say that I would define it that way, but when I think about grading and drainage, I think about your grading around your home, meaning directly adjacent to it. If you have a pond, 100 feet away from your house, that's, as long as everything's sloping away from the house, that kind of stuff I don't really look at as far as grading and drainage from my perspective and my specialties. I also think about rain gutters. Whenever we do a property inspection, whether it's for home inspection or mold, that's one of the key components that I look at up on the roof is the gutters. of course, we make sure that there's no debris in them. We make sure there's no standing water. We also make sure that they flow properly to the downspout. To me, that's what grading and drainage is. But AI actually gave a pretty good idea as to what it is. Another thing, too, that I didn't mention with grading and drainage, something that's really important. And, being that it's May, we're I would call it late spring. Summer's just around the corner. We're dealing with drainage as far as the mountains around here in Wyoming and Utah. We've gotten a lot of snow. I'm sure you listeners are like, yeah, we know, Steve. We hear you talk about it all the time. But it has been something for a lot of people, after COVID hit, Utah and Wyoming not as much, but it still grew quite a bit. But during COVID, I think a lot of people wanted to move away to more rural areas. And I think a lot of people in Utah and Wyoming, for the last few winters, they weren't too bad until this most recent one of 2022 and 2023. My point is I think a lot of people that just moved into Utah or Wyoming, or you could have just moved in Florida, you were used to the seasons where you came from. And I know for a lot of my clients that I'm dealing with in person, a lot of them are like, yeah, I haven't, I've lived here for 10 years and I haven't seen this kind of moisture. So it's something that's, I guess, most people haven't experienced. I was born and raised in Utah, so I'm used to these seasons here. And I will be honest with you, this is the most water and snow I've seen in a long time. Without telling you how old I really am, but I remember I don't recall for sure, but it was in the 80s, early, maybe mid 80s. We had some major flooding in Utah as a kid, and the Great Salt Lake flooded. It flooded out the causeway for the road that goes out there. I remember downtown Salt Lake, like Main Street looked like a river. We had a lot of flooding. I think it was 84, somewhere around there. But anyhow, when you talk about water runoff and spring flooding, you can't forget about sump pumps. And that's something else that I've done episodes on. I've talked about it in the books, but grading and drainage, a sump pump is another thing that comes to mind. So just wanted to bring that up. But a sump pump isn't technically what would be defined as grading and drainage, but it is a mode or a piece of equipment that we use to get the water away from our homes, depending on your setup. I'm sure your question is, so why do we pay that much attention as a mold specialty or a mold specialist company? Why do we care that much about grading and drainage? Shouldn't that be a landscaper's priority or a general contractor? Of course it should. But when it comes to mold, it's a major concern. And I've said it before, and I'll always say it. Water is the most destructive thing to a home. It can cause structural problems. It can cause moisture intrusion concerns. Once that happens, it elevates the humidity in your home or crawl space or wherever. And elevated humidity leads to mold. So you cannot talk about grading and drainage and not think about the mold concerns. It is so important. If you think about it, let's just say for your grading and drainage, you have flat slope outside, water sits there next to your foundation, then it rains, you've got gutters that are full of debris, so they're not operating or functioning properly, and water just falls right next to your foundation. All of that water has got to end up somewhere. It's probably going to cause structural issues, and it's going to make its way into the home. Once it does that, you're going to have mold concerns. So I want to just cover quickly something that we talk about quite often. In order for viable mold growth to be sustainable and to happen, we have to have three main components. That's the mold spores themselves, a food source, so that can be organic or cellulose materials, carpet, insulation, sheetrock, all sorts of stuff like that. And then also it has to have humidity above 60%. For the humidity to be above 60%, you're going to have some sort of defect, whether it's something that isn't a big deal or doesn't seem like it is, flat grading, or it could be something like a water line bursts, or you have a drain pipe in your home that bursts or gets backed up. My point is that defect leads to elevated humidity. Elevated humidity leads to mold concern. That's why grading and drainage is so important. I follow some groups on Facebook. I try to help out with people when I can, and I know I can't help everybody, but if any of you listeners are in some of the groups that I'm in on Facebook and you've seen me give advice, I appreciate you coming over to listen to the Toxic Mold podcast. But I get questions a lot, and one of the main questions I get is, so what do I do about this flat grading I have, let's just say, next to my driveway, in between my driveway and my house? The easy fix is we'll elevate the dirt grade or the concrete grade. That's, to me, something simple. Well, you don't always have those prime conditions for you to just bring in fill dirt to fill it up. And so a lot of how we do the final grading and drainage, or what we do, is dependent on elevations. And what I mean by the elevations is when you ask, what can I do to fix this problem? If we don't have enough foundation showing, that tells us we don't have enough elevation to raise the concrete. Meaning, if we needed to add 6 inches of either concrete or just fill dirt to get proper drainage, we would have to cover up the siding, that's a big no-no. You don't want to cover up your siding. In my opinion, there's never a reason that you have to. There are always other means. And if that's the case, we can put in a French drain or drain tile system. And so the elevations is something that's probably the most important component that we have to consider when we're dealing with grading and drainage. Ideally, when we build a home, we want the top of the foundation, not the top of the walls. The top of the foundation should be like 2 feet above top back of curb. And that just means that the top of that foundation, we have plenty of slope to slope from the house clear out to the curb. That's ideal. Is that always what we see? No. If the top of the foundation is lower than the curb, naturally everything's going to run to the house. So there are things that we consider, if that was the case, that we would have to install, like a drain tile system. So those are things that when you're building a home are very important as far as your contractor and what they do. And I'm not putting any contractors down. There's lots of great ones. There's some that aren't great, but they should know what to do when they're building the home to provide proper grading and drainage. If they don't, that should be a problem. Most licensed contractors know, but on the other hand, just because they know doesn't mean they do it right. So let's say that you do have enough elevation height between the top of your driveway and the top of your foundation. You have an area in between the driveway and the foundation that's flat. All you've got to do is bring in good fill dirt. When I say good fill dirt, this is dirt that can be compacted. Depending on where you live and what types of topsoils or soils period will determine pretty much what you'll use. But you want a good fill dirt, and when I say fill dirt, something we can compact, that once you compact it, when water hits it, it'll slide or run to your driveway. And that's the whole point, is to get the water away from the foundation. Our standards state you should have positive slope away from the home for a minimum of 6 feet. Ideally, you want it to just go for 30, 40 feet, but I understand you can't always do that. But if we can get the water away from the foundation without it just settling there, we've tackled a huge concern. That's how you would elevate the dirt grade, if you can elevate it. You can have a dump truck dump the dirt even on the street. You can get one load of dirt from a trucking company for probably less than $200-$300. And one dump truck with one wheelbarrow would take you half a day to move up to, where you want that dirt placed. So make sure that you understand what you need done before you do it. I can't talk about final grade next to a house without stressing it is very important the materials you use. If you we're going to go back to the scenario I've been talking about. You have your driveway, but you have, let's say, 10 feet between your driveway and the foundation of the house. If you fill that up, because it's already flat, if you fill that up and slope it with just gravel, the water's just going to filtrate through the gravel or the sand and sit on top of the hard soils or the hard surface, and it will still be sitting next to the foundation. So it's very important that when you bring in that fill material, that you use a good compactable dirt. If for some reason you can't, and it is what it is, you can put, a vapor barrier down. Let's just say it's rock or gravel or sand or gravel, whatever you bring in. You can slope it away from the foundation, put a vapor barrier down, and then put a little bit more to cover up that plastic. But my point is make sure you're using a material that's not permeable enough to allow the water to just filter down through and sit next to the foundation. We want to see that water ending up on the driveway in that scenario that we're talking about. I know I covered a lot fairly quickly, but To me, it's fairly simple on how you can fix that. What's my call to action? Once again, simple to me. Take 10 minutes, go outside and walk around your house and make sure you have no standing water or any way of water to be getting from the exterior down into your basement, your crawl space, or whatever's adjacent to it. Like I said, take 5-10 minutes. It's not a big deal. At least I don't think so. If you're not sure and you have a bunch of concerns and you're like, man, don't know how I can have him answer all my questions. Lucky for you, I do consultations. Last week we talked about VPAs. You don't necessarily need a VPA. My consultations are a little bit different. It's not a property inspection. It's actually 90 minutes of me going over what your questionnaire, what you filled out, what your concerns are. You pretty much get 90 minutes of a Q&A with me for me to go over all of my concerns. So you can book a consultation on our website. I will also put a link in the comment section of the podcast. So make sure you just click on the link. You can go pay and then we'll take care of it from there. So once again, this was episode 208. I appreciate you listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast. I hope all of you are doing well and staying safe. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure you go to our website at cnccontractorservices.com and sign up for the mold investigation checklist. Again, go to cnccontractorservices.com and get your free mold investigation checklist today. You can also on cnccontractorservices.com find out more about Steve's courses and books and consultations. Once again, go to cnccontractorservices.com.